So, guys, there's a social media campaign going on, and it's been going on for a while. And the aim of that social media campaign is to shut the pro Ibrahim Traoré supporters, is to shut them up, to bully them in their comment sections, to shadow ban their video, to just make sure that people don't get good information that are written in black and white about Captain Ibrahim Traoré, so that people don't put it out there. There was a guy on social media recently on TikTok that actually talked about Ibrahim Traoré, and everything that guy said about Ibrahim Traoré was fact.
The world needs to pay attention to who this man is, because he is inspiring an African revolution against the West right now. This is 37-year-old Ibrahim Traoré. He is the second youngest head of state in the world right now, and what his supporters say he represents is simple: African independence. You see, Burkina Faso is a former French colony, and since he became leader of the country in 2022, he has accused France of neocolonialism, which in other words is when a country is still trying to control the other, but now just through more hush means. So when he seized power, he started to make drastic changes. He ordered the French troops to leave the country. He expelled French diplomats and Western media. He banned the use of British and French colonial-style judicial wigs in efforts to decolonize the country's judicial system. And then he started making major changes. He started cutting ties with foreign companies involved in Burkina Faso's infrastructure development, like roads, bus stations, airports, and then started replacing them with locally equipped and trained workers, and then acquired around 1,000 road building machines for them to use. He started introducing policies to boost local control over food production and processing. He started pushing for greater state control over energy, reducing their dependence on foreign suppliers of electricity. And then, in the clearest statement to the West yet, he has started buying back a number of the country's major gold mines previously owned by foreign entities. He called the purchases a reclaiming of national wealth from exploitative foreign ownership. But here's where things get crazy, because what started in Burkina Faso has now become something much bigger. They've now joined forces with Mali and Niger to form the alliance of Sahel states, basically saying, we've got each other's backs and we're done with all influence from the West. Ivory Coast and Senegal are now also pushing to remove foreign military bases, and a former Nigerian senator described Traoré's actions as the spirit of a continent yearning to be free, dignified, and prosperous. And that is exactly why we're seeing it slowly transition from one country in Africa to Africa as a whole. Because the question that's increasingly being asked is, why is such a resource-rich continent that literally powers the world so poor themselves? Now, here's the problem. We've seen revolutions like this in Africa before, and they haven't ended well. Back in the 1980s, Thomas Sankara led Burkina Faso with almost the exact same vision Traoré has now, rejecting foreign aid, nationalizing roads and railways, and calling for true African independence. But just 4 years later, he was assassinated. His policies were reversed, and French firms regained contracts for roads, railways, and ports in Western Africa. So is Traoré walking that same path? We don't know. But there are reports that he has survived 19 assassination attempts in 2 years. However, not all those claims have been verified. And it's also important to note that Traoré has his critics. Some call him a dictator because he rose to power in a coup. He's postponed elections, he's banned the media, and he's cracked down on dissent, and critics saying no country has ever developed under democracy. So the question is, what do you think? Is this just another dictator grappling for power, or the man to ignite a long-needed change for Africa?
But what happened at the end of the day was that this guy had over 6 million plus views, and the next thing that happened was that the video got shadow banned. He went to check it out. Maybe the video had been deleted or taken off. Later on, he reviewed the issue. The video came back up, but he knew that the video was already shadow banned. It wasn't getting any comments, no view, nothing.
We have some major news concerning Ibrahim Traoré. So Dylan Page, the news daddy, created a video describing who is Ibrahim Traoré and what Ibrahim Traoré has done. And in that video, he was saying that Ibrahim Traoré has kicked out the France troops from Burkina Faso, and he is embracing an Africa without a debt, an African with a lot of development, and so on and so forth. The video which I watched had more than 6 million views, and suddenly it vanished. So the news daddy came out and said that in his TikTok, the video has not vanished. It's only that it has been limited to some regions, and these regions are Africa. Meaning that France must have seen the video and knew that Ibrahim Traoré will now be popular in the whole world. and just decided to switch off that video from being watched from some regions such as Africa and the countries that are supporting Ibrahim Traoré. And this one has sparked a lot of reaction, showing that there are some countries that will do anything to ensure that information does not reach so many people.
They are not happy with the fact that their narrative could not outclass your own projection of Ibrahim Traoré. And the funny thing is, the projection of Ibrahim Traoré from the black community is actually the truth about Ibrahim Traoré. But what they want to push out to let you understand or to let you see about Ibrahim Traoré is actually a very dark side, which is not true. And if you calm down, you take your time to really, really study their narrative and their statement, you will directly understand the Jibo attack and you will know where it is coming from. In my initial video, when I alleged that I suspect that France is involved, a lot of people in my comment section said, so you are alleging Trump and Macron. Listen up. Listen to this press release, right? And you will get your facts on what. Listen with a heart of criticism, please, and you'll be able to understand why the attack happened, where the attack came from, and what is the conclusion or the end result they are trying to achieve from the attack.
Killed 200 soldiers of Burkina Faso. However, Burkina Faso's military government has not confirmed. The group had earlier claimed to have killed just 60 soldiers, but the dramatic shift in the death count has cast light on the spiraling instability in the country. The offensive came as Burkina Faso's leader, Ibrahim Traoré, was visiting Russia, where he met with Vladimir Putin and discussed counter-terrorism. The May 11 onslaught wasn't just on the military base. Simultaneous attacks reportedly targeted police posts, a market, and a hospital. Burkina Faso is a landlocked country in Africa, which has a population of 23 million. It has been struggling for years to counter jihadist attacks. The country sits in the Sahel region, which is a global hotspot for armed conflict. Armed groups linked with the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda are active here, and military takeovers in the countries in the region, with the promise of providing security, have failed to deliver. 3 countries in the Sahel region, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, are led by military juntas, all of whom have distanced themselves from Western allies and have developed closer ties with Russia instead. Footage released on Wednesday, unidentified men, likely jihadists, were spotted tearing down flags of all 3 junta-led countries. They also tore down a Russian tricolour during the incident. As violence and extremism continues to escalate, analysts say that these insurgents move across borders. They launch surprise attacks and take control of towns and roads. Now, for more on this, we have with us on the show Beverly Ochieng, who is a senior analyst at Control Risks, joining us live from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me again.
Now, Beverly, what are the key factors driving the recent surge in terrorist attacks in Burkina Faso and across the Sahel, particularly in areas that are controlled by military regimes?
I mean, as you pointed out, there have been challenges in strengthening the security apparatus in the Sahel because military rule has not just led to political instability, but also security gaps. And since the coups in Burkina Faso in 2022 and in Niger in 2023, there has been a radical change in security partnerships, diplomatic realignments, and the sudden loss of additional forces, particularly from the UN, from France, and other Western countries. We're also seeing a trend where militant groups, Islamic State, but particularly Al-Qaeda, has been operating in retaliation against the military governments, and they take advantage of security gaps to be able to intensify attacks on forces and on civilians.
And how have the military-led governments of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger affected counter-terrorism efforts? And what challenges do they face in regaining control over these territories dominated by insurgent groups?
So the three countries have mostly focused on a military response. And because of budgetary constraints and the lack of partners, it means that there's a lot of strain on the national forces. Burkina Faso, for instance, has recruited heavily into what is called the Volunteers in the Defense of the Fatherland. But the VDPs, because of their links to the government, face repeated attacks from militant groups. In Mali, the resurgence of a rebel insurgency in the northern part of the country has inadvertently contributed to less focus and deployment in the south. So we're seeing that militants are exploiting this to put pressure in mining areas. And in Niger, the Tillaberi region, where the capital is, has had security gaps since the coup, and Islamic State continues to besiege not just residents, but also security forces.
Right. And what role can regional cooperation and also international support play in stabilizing the Sahel? Have the current strategies been in addressing the growing influence of Al-Qaeda and these other extremist factions in the region?
So we've seen that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, they launched a joint force under the Alliance of Sahel states. They've been carrying out operations along the borders, and there's been some minimal successes from this. They're also receiving support from other geopolitical actors, such as Russia. As you pointed out, Traoré was in Moscow talking about the security support he's getting from the government there. They're also purchasing drones from countries like Turkey. But then there's also the need for further support. So the Economic Community of West African States has been trying to establish a counterinsurgency force. Because of their tense relations with the Sahel, it's been very difficult to get more cooperation to secure their borders. But national armies in countries like Benin, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, which are also threatened by the insurgency, are increasing their capacity. There's also calls for dialogue with militant groups, but the concern is this could expose people to integrity issues, and militant groups themselves are not necessarily willing to engage with the current governments in the Sahel.
Right. Beverly, as always, great to have you on the show. Thank you for being with us.
Listen to everything all together and look at it from a very, very critical perspective. You will be able to understand what the plan on Jibo was. They've been spamming that news all over the place. And a critical minded person can really, really sit down and figure out the one and twos and be like, okay, this is what is really going on. What they want to do is to control the narrative. And by controlling the narrative, they are going to be fueling the fire with a lot of lies, with a lot of misinformation. They've been doing this for a very long time. So this means that you should try your best to keep giving your voice, even though it might seem like your voice is not being heard. Your voice is being heard, but some people are standing somewhere to make sure your information don't get across. The problem with them now is that majority of the African population cannot be misinformed again, even though a lot of people are still not trying to support this movement. Because if you listen to the black guest that was speaking on the host, please take your time to listen to her properly, because you can actually miss some intentions. It's about the intention of the speaker. You will realize that even the black guest that was speaking to the host was a little bit very biased. I don't know if you consider it extremely biased or a little bit biased, trying to discredit in her own way, but she didn't want to come out, very, very openly. So these things are just the things that I have noticed for quite a while, and I feel like, okay, let me just bring it out to the people so that the people don't get discouraged, because I know a lot of people might have been facing this thing. So this is what they want you to see. They've always want to sell narratives to people, demonize the people, then move in. And how do they move in? They want to say, okay, now you need help from the international community, you need aid, you need to borrow loan. The biggest problem they have with Ibrahim Traoré is that this guy is trying to be independent. He's trying to make his nation and his people self-sufficient in a world where they won't be able to borrow anything. Now they can't use the citizens to protest against Ibrahim Traoré. Now they're trying to use the terrorists to kill the people so that the people surrender and they protest. And when they protest, they will step in, use a coup d'etat. But we know all these things. So my big information to the West is that it's never gonna work. We know this moves. So they say what you know is no longer breaking news. It's already old story. So maybe you people can try something else. Maybe that would be better.